What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Dom and Pop DC Sports Talk Plus podcast, DC's fastest growing father son sports podcast. That's right. This week, we're checking in on the NFL draft. We're going to talk Chase Young, boomer bust year, and of course, we're going to get to our kickouts of the week. So hang around. We got a lot of good stuff to do. Pop, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Doing good. Just making sure you got things straight for this episode.
Yeah, I don't. But we'll sort it out as it goes. It's definitely there's a level of specificness that I know you want to adhere to that sometimes have a little more loosey goosey. So we're gonna have you bring in our second segment today so that we make sure it goes exactly the way you envision it.
Right.
So I'm along for the ride. All right.
That's how it is.
But
That's how it
hey,
is. Boomer bust year.
Jesus Christ.
Well, of course it's a boomer bust year. That's obvious. The juiciness in that topic is, do we think he's a boom or a bust?
Okay, so that's exactly what I said. Before we get started, we just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in, watching. You guys made our week. We had a very successful week last week. We hit multiple milestones kind of all at once, which is pretty cool. So thank you guys for checking in and checking out the content. Hopefully you guys like it and you're back this week. And if you're back this week, you like what you saw last week, hit the subscribe button, please. Hit the like button, comment, let us know, hey, saw your video for the first time last week, thought it was great. Now I'm back for more. You're going to catch us every Monday morning at 10 a.m. We're popping up, and maybe schedule changes once things get hot. We've been known to do an emergency pod. We've been known to throw in some twice a week kind of guys. So hang around. We're going to keep it interesting for sure. So thank you guys again from the bottom of our hearts.
Just need Danny Boy to pull that trigger. An emergency pod will be coming.
Yep, and Mello wants to say thank you as well in the background there.
Perfect timing.
Always perfect timing. He was silent for 30 minutes of pod prep, and then he chirps up 2 minutes into the recording. It's classic. But anyways, we keep it raw around here. Do our thing. So without further ado, again, another slow week of sale news. Things have stalled a little bit there. I think this is just a product of multi-billion-dollar transactions take a lot of time. So not much to talk about there. So we're going to pivot. We're going to talk some NFL draft today because it is April. Crazily enough, it's the month of April. It's spring. My air conditioner is on. Finally, it's good weather out here. I know it's been heating up on the East Coast too. So that means it's time to get into the NFL draft. So we think a good way to get started today, we're going to just start right on our top five overall for the whole league. And then we'll give a couple quick thoughts on the Commanders picks. Obviously picking at 16, not the sexiest spot in the draft. So a little tough to predict what's going to be going down there, but we can give some quick thoughts on that before we do a deep dive as things start to firm up later in the month. You ready, Pop? Should we get
I'm
right
ready.
to it?
Let's do it.
All right, so it starts off easy, right? We're going to be sourcing from four networks for this. We're going to kind of synthesize everything from NFL Network, CBS Sports, Mel Kiper, and Yahoo. So basically, picks number 1 and 2 are pretty obvious at this point. It looks pretty clear. I know initially you guys were saying Bryce Young number 1, but across the board, it looks like it's going to be my boy C.J. Stroud out of Ohio State, which I totally agree with. C.J. Stroud at number 1, going down in Carolina, going to go play with Frank Reich. They got a pretty good roster down there. That should be fun. Number 2,
I think they've declared their love for C.J. Stroud. They seem to be, unless they're doing an okey doke. I think it sounds pretty obvious that that's the way they're going.
It seems like that's going to be the one, because it's just how often do you see 4 or 5 networks like this all in alignment on the number?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
That's definitely happening. So he's going there at number 1 to Carolina. Then you got Bryce Young at number 2. Very obvious pick there. So the Houston Texans, they get their guy as well. So it seems like everybody kind of wins. Right? Finally get their QB. You got to hope Bryce Young can can perform up to his potential because the kid's unreal. And then you got number 3. This is where it starts to kind of hit the fan. This is where we get that NFL draft drama that everybody's looking for. I think 1 and 2, I think that Bryce Young ticket is going to go in as soon as Goodell goes to the podium for the first pick. They're already going to have that one. But number 3, this is where it gets fun.
Yeah, C.J. Stroud. You mean yeah. I got
the Texans are going to go right back, and I think if for whatever reason they go with Young, the Texans are just going to go Stroud. So
yep,
that's done. Number 3, things get interesting. So right now the Arizona Cardinals are sitting at number 3, and right now, as you're all, I'm sure, aware, the Arizona Cardinals are paying Kyler Murray $160 million. So despite his injuries and perhaps a little bit of subpar performance, they're not drafting a quarterback. But there are a handful of quarterbacks here that people are thinking, wow, maybe we're going to have to trade up for. Things are going to get interesting. So that's what makes this kind of fun. And looking across the board, all 4 of our sources here have a trade. So it's going to get weird. It's going to get funky. So the NFL has, or NFL.com, has Anthony Richardson going at number 3 to the Indianapolis Colts. So the Colts are just going to move up that 1 pick to guarantee nobody can jump in front of us. We're taking Anthony Richardson. And CBS has Richardson also going at number 3, but this time it's to the Seattle Seahawks, which a lot of people really have said. I think that one's really interesting. A lot of people have said that's like the best possible landing spot for him. I have some thoughts on that. We'll give those after we go through some of the other scenarios, I think. Mel Kiper always tends to go a little bit left of the crowd. He's got Will Levis at number 3 to the Colts, which, again, I have thoughts. We'll give those later. And then we've got Yahoo kind of in conjunction with NFL taking Richardson at number 3 to the Colts as well. So 3 of our 4 outlets have the Colts moving up to go get that number 4 draft pick. I wonder what that price is going to be like. What's it like moving from 3 to 4 to get a guy?
Yeah, 1 pick.
Because on one hand, yes, it's just 1 pick. But on the other hand, a team like Seattle, that's a little further back, I have 2 picks, but still a little further back, might want to move up, and they might have to pay a little bit more. So maybe that raises Indianapolis's price too. Maybe there's a team like Tampa Bay or something that nobody's thinking about that has quarterback problems that wants to jump up there and get the guy. This is where it gets kind of interesting. So, Pop, what are your thoughts on this number 3 situation? Do you have predictions or opinions? Just whatever you got.
It's interesting for sure. I mean, the Colts is an interesting spot, right? Because if they aren't able to go up and get their quarterback, or if they're don't really like whoever's going to fall to number 3 there, because obviously there's question marks about those guys. I mean, Richardson has all the talent in the world, but is he ready? And then there seems to be a lot of mixed opinions on Will Levis, and I know you're not a big fan. So, do the Colts really want to make that move, or do they want to try to maybe go after Lamar Jackson and try to steal him from under the Ravens? So it's interesting. It's a tough spot to be in. You always want that top 5 pick, but being in that position, especially where the Colts sit, that's a tough spot. Whereas the Cardinals are in a great spot, right? Because they can really dangle that number 3 pick and, get it to the highest bidder. All I got to say is I'm not an expert on these rookie QBs, but you better be damn sure that you really like the kid before you make a move like that, because it is gonna cost them. I would imagine it costs them a number 1 pick in the next draft.
I think it's at least going to be this year's first, next year's first, and then maybe like a 2nd and a 5th or something like that.
That's a huge price. That's a huge price to pay for something like that, I think.
Yeah.
Very risky.
It's hard. It is very risky. And when you're talking about guys like Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, I mean, I'll just get it out of the way now. I'm not impressed by Levis personally. He's got a gun, but there is a graveyard full of NFL quarterbacks with guns. He can sling the thing for sure. but arm talent is the price of admission to be an NFL quarterback, and it's everything else that makes you good. And he has an incredible arm, but he also has a little bit of that. We saw it with Wentz, where he can fling the thing, but he doesn't have any touch. So he flings the thing on a pass that needs to kind of hit the guy's hand soft so he can get upfield and go. Now all of a sudden the ball's going into the air and it's deflected. Um, so I'm not particularly a Levis fan for that reason. I just think his arm strength it looks really good when he's in shorts and a t-shirt, and it looks really good when he's playing for Kentucky and he's not playing against any real teams. But I think in the NFL, a guy like that gets swallowed up pretty quick. Richardson is reminiscent of the Trey Lance situation, where you've got this guy with all the potential in the world, and you've seen him do it sometimes in flashes, but he completed 50% of passes last year.
Yeah, I think he's high
That's
risk.
the other side of it. He is super high risk. So
Yeah.
that's where a team like Seattle becomes interesting to me, because you already have the guy. And if you blow it, you already have the guy and you have extra draft picks because of
But
the Russ
didn't they
situation.
just sign Geno Smith to a pretty sizable contract? I just
It's
don't
only 3
see them.
years.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, I
only three
guess
years. So
it would make sense for Richardson to come in and sit, but it's just the trading that draft capital to move up when you've pretty much already committed to your guy.
yeah,
It I don't think that's going to happen. I
I
just
mean,
guess
two
I'll go
things.
on the record. I think that's one of those interesting sort of mock draft clickbait situations, but I don't see that happening. Guess I'll just
So
say that.
two things to keep in mind here. One, Seattle actually has a surplus of first rounders because of the Russell Wilson trade. So if we talk about, are you handicapping yourself
Fair
long
play.
term, they're bringing themselves back down to the average long term. And two, Geno Smith is 32 years old. Last season, while he was good, he wasn't Josh Allen, right? But
Right.
he was still good. And it was the only, there is a conversation. I'm a Geno Smith fan, but there is a conversation to be had about, hey, he's 32 years old. This is the first good season he had. Does he regress to the mean a little bit next year? Does he continue to build? That's something to keep an eye on, I think. But overall, it is interesting. I think Seattle is the best place for Richardson. I don't know if I would do it if I was Seattle personally, but for Richardson being great, I think that would be a great place for him.
Yeah, I don't see it happening, personally, but I could be wrong too, but
Hey,
I
you
don't see
had
it.
Mac Jones at number 3 a couple years ago.
Did
So
I?
you
I have to
did. You
trust. I have
did.
to trust you on that one.
It's on the tape. It's on the tape.
Yeah, I
But
think you.
yeah, we'll see. That's the my main concern here for any of the teams trading up at number 3 is giving away. If you were going to get CJ Stroud or you were going to get Bryce Young, who looks like a little bit more of a sure thing, do it. But
Right,
giving away that much for a guy in Richardson that people are saying, look, if this guy's good, he's going to change the NFL forever. But if this guy's bad, he's going to be unusable. That makes
right.
me a little bit nervous. That makes me really nervous. So I'm glad the Commanders are not in that conversation. Personally, I'm glad I don't have
Yeah,
to stress about it.
and it
Um,
seems like Will Anderson is the next guy to come off the board in terms
yeah,
of non-quarterback or first non-quarterback to come off the board. He seems to be the consensus there. So most likely going to the Cardinals, I guess, since they're not in the QB business.
yeah, either the Cardinals or it just depends on what the trade situation, how that falls out. But if the Cardinals do end up at 4, we probably see that going down. I think Will Anderson will be the next guy off the board. Incredible talent on the edge. Really, really great player.
Out
So
of
it's a little
Alabama.
hard. Yeah, it's a little hard to keep projecting past that. I mean, you have Jalen Carter is in the conversation. Lot of stuff going on outside of football with
So who do
him.
they got? Who do they got? Our boys picking.
So our boys are looking. I think Joey Porter Jr., according to Hogs Haven, is the most mocked player going to the Commanders is a cornerback out of Penn State. Jahan Dotson also came from Penn State, speaks very highly of him. Obviously, he knows him very well. He's the star cornerback there, while Dotson was the star receiver. So those two saw each other a lot in practice. And I mean, there's a lot of NFL corners that can't cover Jahan. So if old boy was covering Jahan pretty well in practice, maybe he's worth a look at 16. But what do you think? What do you think draft wise for the Commanders? Pop, real quick. I know we're running a little long here.
Well, yeah, some folks, and I heard this buzz on the radio, boy Logan Paulson was talking about this as well. But Deonte Banks, cornerback out of University of Maryland, apparently his measurables kind of blow Porter's away. He can run a 4.35 40. He's got a 42-inch vertical, 136-inch broad jump. So he's actually on CBS's projected mock draft for the Commanders. So he's a Terp. I'm automatically going to like him, but it's an interesting one. You know, some folks have us going O line, which I wouldn't hate at all. That's question is, do we feel like we've done enough at O line through free agency? But Broderick Jones, offensive tackle out of Georgia, is a possibility there, and I wouldn't hate that at all. So yeah, we'll have to see. I guess it was an interesting take by Awad on the radio of like, who would you not want them to take? What position would upset you if they took? So, I don't think any of us would want to see a receiver or,
I got one that's kind of spicy that's been getting thrown out there. So the three positions that kind of get discussed the most are cornerback, tackle, and tight end.
Agree.
And that third one is the one I definitely don't want to see is tight end. And everybody is drawing, I think, way too straight of a line from Bieniemy to we need a superstar tight end, and not understanding that line really demonstrates Bieniemy understands what his best talent is and will design his offense around his best talent. So if you look at some of the names that have been taken in the first round at tight end, Tyler Eifert, OJ Howard, Hayden Hurst, Noah Fant, I don't want these guys on my team. I'm sorry, not for a first round pick. It's just not worth it.
I think you can get a tight end in the second, third, fourth round that's got talent, right? I mean,
it worked out for Kansas City, right? Travis Kelce, third rounder.
Yeah, and another one mentioned was Osiris Torrance. I guess he's an offensive guard out of Florida. That's how NFL Network mentioned him. So, yeah, I think generally offensive line or cornerback seem to be the two most obvious choices, right? And we'll see what happens. I mean, I guess the good news is it's kind of one of those drafts where there isn't like this. There's some obvious needs, but I don't feel like either position is a desperate need. So it gives them some flexibility to like really get the guy that they want, and hopefully that's what happens, right? So we're going to do a mock draft. We're going to do our top predictions and our predictions for the Commanders. We should probably just go 1 through 16, like kind of think we did a similar situation last year. So we'll
like look
for that in a future pod. We'll do our mock draft. Sometime in the next pod or two. I guess the draft is coming up, so right before the draft hits. But some good stuff there.
Yeah, lots of good stuff to talk about.
Our next topic is spicy. Let's get into that.
So, speaking of draft and speaking of Commanders, the Commanders' marquee draft pick of the Ron Rivera era, the Riv era, so to speak, Chase Young, coming up on year 4, believe it or not. And we got to look into, are we picking up that 5th-year option? What are we doing with Chase Young? So we want to discuss today, Pop, I'm going to let you phrase it, but we want to discuss where Chase Young stands within the organization, I guess. Go ahead. Give the people what they want.
Well, specifically, like the headline, and shout out to the Junkies this week because they got some news. They were reported on for the segment that they did, which is, will Chase Young end up being a boom or a bust? And that's what I want to get into. What's our prediction? And then we could talk a little bit about whether we think they ought to pick up his 5th-year option. So a few weeks ago, you and I both went on the record as we think they should pick up his option. but that doesn't necessarily translate exactly into do we think he's going to be a boom or a bust? What would we predict? I think it's too early to say if he is a boom or a bust because of the injuries. But this, as you said in your opening, is the boom or bust year. It's really going to come down to what happens this year. And you have to factor in the fact that they used the number 2 pick on him. So if he has a nice year or a better than average year, do you consider that a bust? Right? Because you use a number 2 pick on him, right? So have you changed your mind? Do you still think they should pick up the option on Chase Young? And if you had to predict at the end of next year, are we going to be calling him a boom or a bust? What would you say?
So it's tough. Oh man, it's hard because I want to say we're calling him a boom, but it's tough because I think numbers on that edge position are kind of fluky because it depends on who's finishing. Not necessarily the guy who's disrupting doesn't always get as much credit as the guy who's there. Um, if I had to say, I might say bust, to be honest with you, which I know
Yeah.
is probably a little bit left. If I had to predict right now, there's just too much in the air.
So
The
does that change your
ACL,
mind? Does that change your mind about whether they should pick up his option?
no, because it's smart business. There's
But
a, I think there's kind of a, because if he is a boom, we are screwed. We are so screwed. If he plays
right,
well, he's
because then you're in
gone.
the franchise tag mode and all of that,
He's in the
right?
he's in the wind. You either got to tag him and you got to pay him through the nose because defensive end gets paid like crazy. So you either got to tag him and you got to pay him through the nose, and then you're locked up with probably 60 to 70 million dollars on your defensive line next year, almost like a third of your cap, or you gotta, or maybe a quarter of your cap, or you gotta let him go. If you get him on that 5th year option and he balls, and you say, you know what, we still don't want to spend all that money on the defensive line, you can trade him on that option, and that becomes really
I,
valuable.
I mean, couldn't they cut him? Like, I mean, there's options, right? So, like, I think I agree with you. I think it makes good business sense for them to keep him. I will say though, and it kills me because I want Chase Young to be a boom, right? I think he's
Yeah,
got great leadership qualities, and you could see him firing up the team. And he's by all accounts a good dude, right? I think he probably made some mistakes early in his career, not being in OTAs and going out doing game shows and commercials. I think that was a poor choice on his part. But yeah, and I think he's got incredible talent and incredible skill. And that, I hope he's going to be a boom. But it feels a
yeah,
little bit like rash burning there, right? That where things are trending as the number 2 pick, and I think he's got a solid NFL career ahead of him. It's feeling like it's trending towards a bust, and I just hope I'm wrong about that. I really
yeah,
do. I'm really rooting for Chase. I do think they should pick up his 5th year option because I agree with you. You've put your chips in the table already and picking him number 2. You've got to continue with the chips in. He was impacted by that unfortunate injury. He hasn't lit the world on fire, because last year of NFL play between, before the injury and coming back from the injury this past year, we haven't really seen it. He did get Defensive Rookie of the Year his first year, although it felt like a little bit by default, but it was a good, solid first rookie year. But I had to say, he's trending towards a bust. And
yeah. I mean, he had that year, that rookie year, he was decent for the first half, and then that back half of the year where we made the playoff push, he was absolutely the best player on the field the entire way. Just completely disrupted games and was that game breaking talent that we drafted him to be. But then the next year, he wasn't just not good, he was bad. Up until the ACL
and
injury, he was
honestly,
bad.
it's such an easy story to say, well, he didn't attend OTAs and he was distracted and he was doing other things. But it felt like he was unprepared. Like it felt like
Well,
he wasn't he wasn't receiving the coaching he was getting. He was trying to do different things. He was trying to develop different things in his skill set. And he just didn't feel like he was well prepared, and
so
he was trying to overpower people. And this is the NFL, right? I mean, you've got to play to your strengths in the NFL, right?
Yeah. So I think something you mentioned coaching there, and I think something that got wildly overlooked last year was the firing of our defensive line coach in August, right? And you saw the defensive line come out and struggle at the beginning
Fair
of the
point.
year. You saw the defensive line suck the year before that. That's obviously the year where Chase Young tore his ACL halfway into the season, and the defensive line was terrible that whole year. We fired the defensive line coach, Coach Z, and Ryan Kerrigan kind of take over. And all of a sudden, about a third of the way into the season, the defensive line starts to become what we all thought they could be. And you see
Yeah.
guys like Ridgeway, you see guys like F.A. Obata, you see guys like James Smith Williams look like really good players, and these are nobodies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, F.A. Obata is a guy that was on the roster because you basically get an extra spot through the international program.
So
Like,
hopefully you're. It's a great point. Hopefully
so
the
what I'm
coaching
saying
makes a
is,
difference.
yeah, what I'm saying is maybe that coaching impacted Young's game too, and maybe it was an issue of you've got too many things in your ear, almost like what happened with Jamin Davis. You've got this incredible instinctual talent. You've got too many things in your ear telling you to play too many different ways. He needs to just go out there and play football. And maybe if he goes out there and plays football with all the other complementary pieces, he balls. So I think, unfortunately, if I'm putting money, you got to hedge the bust right now. But I think we're hoping he booms, and I think things are set up for him to boom. So this is going to be the year that we really see.
Do you think
Um,
that if you had to choose, I want to throw one last question at you real quick here. Curveball. You had to choose, you can only keep one. Chase Young or Montez Sweat, and you got to choose now. You got 30 seconds to make this choice. You can only
Chase
keep one
Young.
on your roster. You go
Chase
Chase Young.
Young. I think we
Wow.
saw
I thought you'd
Sweats.
struggle. I think you'd struggle with that a little bit more.
I think we saw. I am low on Sweat. I don't think Sweat's that great. I think we saw his ceiling last year. I think he's a really good athlete. I'm not sure he's a great
He
football
graded
player.
out. He graded out pretty great in terms of
He's
quarterback pressures.
He's very good. Don't get me wrong, but I'm talking at the standard of Commanders defensive lineman that we have right now. I think he's firmly number 3, and I think him and Chase Young are tied for 3, and I think Chase has that potential to be number 1, whereas I don't think Sweat's ever going to be the best
I
lineman
like
on
it.
this team.
I'll go with you on that one. I'll go with you on that one. I like it.
That's where I'm at personally, and the leadership stuff that you see from. We're looking at a guy in Chase Young that I was saying in 2020, growing up in the DMV, we had to watch, and at my age, Ray Lewis was the guy. I'm looking at you and I'm going, this guy with his leadership and his talent, this is going to be our Ray Lewis. This is our guy. This is the guy that's going to run everything. And Montez Sweat has never been in that conversation.
But
So
let's
for
just
that,
just hope
got
he's
to bet
not
on the
more.
upside.
I hope I'm wrong here, and this will be my final thought on it. He feels a little bit more like our RG3, right? Like number 2 pick in the draft, a lot of hype, good first year, local kid. Not that RG3 was a local kid, but that ACL injury, which turned out to be, similar to RJ3's, a much more severe injury than the typical ACL. Not that ACL is ever good. Is he ever going to really come back and be the guy who we
Yeah.
thought he was? That's what worries me. But I'm rooting for him. I'm
Yeah.
absolutely all in rooting for him.
Me too.
Love
100%.
the kid.
Love the kid. Really want the best for him. So I think that's it on the Chase Young conversation. I
Yep.
think we've covered that. At the end of the day, we're just gonna have to see it on the field. And you know what? Maybe
We
he's
kept the
hanging out
people
with.
waiting long enough.
Yep, yep. We kept the people waiting. We should get into it. Let's do it. The Che Cazz of the week, ladies and gentlemen. We had a fun one last week, and we're gonna stay on the diamond this week. We got another baseball one, but we got a little bit,
All
got a
baseball
little bit
all
of
the
crossover.
time.
Yeah, a little bit of a crossover here. I mean, come on, it's an Italian American podcast. You expect us not to cover some baseball? I mean, please. But you got a great one this week, and that is just something that for me, it never gets old. It never gets old. And that's people just absolutely deucing themselves on the first pitch. It's so good. It's always terrible. And you had this week Travis Kelsey go out there and throw the first pitch, and he bombed. He bombed. He totally he just bounced the ball it was like it looked like a tennis like a ping pong serve. Like he put it off the table, and then when it came off the hop, it looked pretty good. It might have been a strike off the hop, but it took a pretty weird hop. It
Oh
was
my
too
God. Well, it
funny.
looked like, I've heard from people that have done the first pitch. I mean, one, they say it's like one of the most nerve wracking and nervous things that you could ever do, right?
Yeah,
But they say that the choice that you make is between should you toss it, right? So you take the safe route and just like you're playing toss, or do you do the full wind up and you go to try to get in, the stress position. And it looked like Kelsey chose the latter, right? The higher risk scenario, getting into his windup, showing off his athletic ability. And, oh my God, it was not good. It did
hey,
not good. So he's on there with the infamous pitches of the Conor McGregors and the Stephen Currys and others that are in that club
50
just
Cent for sure.
absolutely horrible picks, right? So I don't know. I think his tight end career is pretty safe because I don't see him making a major league a crossover into Major League Baseball at this point. So
Definitely not. They talk about. I know on the New Heights podcast, Travis Kelsey's podcast with his brother, they had a long conversation about can NFL athletes play in the NBA. They basically said like NBA athletes can definitely play in the NFL, but can NFL athletes play in the NBA? And Travis was saying yes. We know for sure NFL athletes cannot play in the MLB
well, some
after
have.
watching that. And some of them have. Kyler Murray, maybe it's time for him to make the move.
Deion
But
Sanders actually did it, and Bo Jackson. The
it's
two.
it's it's
It's
happened,
rare,
and we've
extremely
seen
rare.
Mahomes had the opportunity. We see a lot of times guys pick either or coming out of college,
We saw what happened
but
to MJ. It didn't work out too good for him.
yeah, and Travis Kelsey, maybe the Michael Jordan of the tight end position in the NFL, but certainly not the Michael Jordan of first pitches. He's more like the 50 Cent category for that. I mean, that was one of the worst
Are you going to
first
put a
pitches I've
clip?
ever
Are you going to
seen.
put a clip in this week, son? You gonna
I tell
got
you
time?
what, if I don't forget to edit the podcast and have to do it at 12:30 at night, I'll put the clip in this
You're
week.
gonna
That
get a
was my bad
reminder
last
text.
week. I was laying in bed. Sunday night, a little story time. Sunday night, I had everything done. It was like 8:30, and I said to myself, you know what? I'm gonna get a good night's sleep tonight. I'm gonna get in bed on time. Totally forgot about the podcast. I'm in bed at 10:30. Never happens. I'm in bed at 10:30, just relaxing, winding down, getting ready to go to sleep. And about 11:45, I say, okay, turn the light off. The second I flipped the switch, I went, oh my God, the podcast. And so at that point, video editing was out the window. It wasn't happening.
There's our West Coast technical department at work. But I think the whole scene, back to Travis Kelsey, he walked out to the mound with his mom, arm in arm with his mom at Cleveland Guardians game. I guess, are they from Cleveland? I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
must
They
be.
went to
You
they
got
went to high school in Cleveland.
the big pink purple mascot. I don't know what that's all about with the Guardians. I guess we'll have a debate about who's got the worst name,
worst
Guardians or Commanders, in a future pod. But then, oh my God, he just skips it. The catcher, dude, is scared. He flinches and tries to just run out of the way. Oh my God, a poor Travis
You
Kelsey.
see, Kelsey just ran right for the catcher after he threw. He's like, my bad, my bad, my bad. So, Pop, I got to ask you.
I got one for you after you ask me. I got one for you after you ask me.
It might be the same question. You're in the position here, right? After we keep just exponentially growing this podcast, and we're headed on that trajectory, right? And so we're at the Nats game. We're at the Nats game, and this time I'm not playing guitar at the bullpen. This time, Dom and Pop throwing out the first pitch, and I say, you know what, Pop? I want you to throw this one out. You're in that position. Are you tossing it, or are you going in the windup and slinging the thing?
I'm tossing it.
All right.
I'm telling you, I'm giving you two things. Nats, invite me out. I'm hitting that glove. You saw me on the beach. Pop performs under pressure. I'm hitting that glove. There ain't gonna be no Travis Kelsey gonna happen here.
What do you think you're throwing miles per hour wise?
Oh, it's going. I'm
15?
just worried about it. I'm just hitting the glove.
15?
That's it. I'm not trying to throw with power.
It's a light cruise.
It's going to be precision. I'm Taylor Heineken in it. Just
There
getting
you
it
go.
there.
Yeah, there you go. You just got it. It might go like this a little bit, but it's gonna hit the glove.
It's going
I
to get
like
to
it.
the glove. He's
I'm
not going to
doing
have
the
to reach
same thing.
for it.
I'm
Yeah.
doing the same thing. It's a light toss. You got to go out there. You got to throw the toss, and you can go like this. So
I got
thank
a
you,
little
everybody.
now. Mine's a little different. You brought it up. Italian American Pod baseball, right? Trivia question. Who's the greatest Italian American baseball player of all time? This is a
Oh my god.
generational question.
Yeah, you're gonna burn me on that one, man. I got
Any
nothing.
idea? Who do you know? Do you know? Think. It goes back. And you're handicapped. It's well before you're born. Back to
It's
the
got
50s.
what's his name? DiMaggio? Is that his name?
There you go, son. You did it. You made it to
Woo!
the next round.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Good
Yes,
job.
sir.
Joe DiMaggio,
Clutch.
without a doubt. Came
Clutch.
in clutch.
Clutch. Yankee, right?
Yeah,
Of
absolutely.
course,
Yankee
right? Yeah, come
Clipper.
on.
This one's for
Back in the 50s, our
this
people,
one's
it
for
was
cousin
we were
Rob.
in one place. We didn't spread out until later. Always
All
one
right.
neighborhood.
Nailed it.
That's
You
good.
nailed it.
Oh yeah,
End on a high note.
I was racking. I'm sitting there going, I didn't think Mickey Mantle was Italian. I was wondering if it was a trick question. I was like really thinking through it, but I knew
All right.
DiMaggio. I had
Yankee
that one.
Clipper.
I had that one. Good stuff. Good stuff. I think that's it for us today,
That's
Pop. I
it.
think we've covered
End on
covered
a high note.
everything.
Always end on
Yeah,
a high note, son.
gotta end on a high note. We'll be back next week with some more in-depth draft talk, and who knows, maybe we'll see you between now and then. Little sale conversation. Who knows? Anyways, without further ado, guys, I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Send it to one fan that loves Italians, Commanders, baseball, football, anything. Anything they think they'd enjoy,
How could you
give us
not
a
love
shout.
all that?
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week.